Well, good afternoon. Well, I was getting prepared for the sermonette today. It's supposed to be a sermonette. I started thinking and I said to myself, well, after yesterday's sermon, I just have to get a song so that I could come up here and give a song. I started looking up some lyrics and my computer died totally. So I couldn't get the lyrics, and you have all been spared my singing. Unfortunately, I also had an outline of the things that I was going to say, and that I could not get either. And then Brother Kenyon came to me and he said, well, can you expand it into a sermon instead of just a sermonette? So here I am, and I'm going to ask your help. What I want to do is, when I come up, I'm going to mention some scriptures, and I do not know where they're at. If any of you know where they're at, you can either stand up, read it, or tell us where it is, and we can all turn to it. You probably notice I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't given any kind of a sermon or a sermonette in quite a while. I normally go to small groups, and I don't have as many people. This is actually frightening for me. However, for those of you that are looking for a title, I guess you can use the Mechanics of the Law and its Biblical Application. It's a paper that I wrote a while back, and it basically deals with the mechanics as the workings of the law. And again, Brother Kenyon gave a very good introduction to what I was going to say, so he also, now I have less material to work with, and the sermon's going to be a little bit shorter, which you might appreciate anyway. Most of the information that I got, and the reason I went into this type of study is because I was accused once of being a hypocrite. Someone told me that you keep certain commandments, but there are over 300 commandments in the Bible. What do you do with those? You're ignoring those. You're picking and you're choosing. And that's what led me to study and to come up with, I said, well, they might be right. Maybe they are. If I should be doing this, I'm gonna find out. So I also have a little background in the study of law. I got involved with a group of so-called patriots. They were studying what common law was, and some thought that we were under the UCC and everyone was against the New World Order and what we could do and what not to do. So I got involved with that, and I got a little background on the things, how the government works and how the laws work and things like this. So I had in my possession Black's Law Dictionary. I had Bovier's dictionary. I also have Westminster Bible Dictionary, which is very, very good. And of course, we have the Bible. Using all these things, all these resources, I looked up the word law and found a very interesting definition for it. You'll notice that in the Old Testament, many times, especially when Yahweh speaks, he talks about commandments, statutes, and judgments. When you go to the New Testament, The only thing that's mentioned, I think the word ordinance is used once, and I'm not sure it's properly translated either. But the word law, I found out to be indiscriminately used when dealing with any form of human behavior. And one way I could, the best way to explain this is by giving you an example. I asked a friend once, when you come up to a stop sign, obviously you stop, but why do you stop? He told me because it's the law. And I says, okay. And I think you've all seen the signs that say, buckle up, it's the law. Well, actually, it's a law. It's not the law. However, it's used that way many times. Stop signs, buckling up are all considered ordinances. And there is a very important distinction between commandments, statutes, and ordinances. And that's one of the things that Brother Kenyon was talking about, what he was talking about when he talked about law. And some people say it was all nailed to the cross. In the New Testament, it talks about these laws that were nailed to the cross, but it does not specify what they were. So I continued, and I looked up the different definitions for commandments, statutes, ordinances. You also have judgments. You have contract law. You got dietary laws. There's all types of different laws. They all go under, if you were to make a heading and say law, all of these would be the different types of law. And they all are slightly different, every one of them. An example of commandment, for example, the commandments, if you look in the Westminster Bible Dictionary, you'll find that it talks about that the commandments are actually the fundamental law. The fundamental law. This is the basis of Yahweh's government. He uses the Ten Commandments. Again, an example of that would be the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of a state. That is the fundamental law. Notice also how these two parallel each other. The commandments don't give you a penalty. It says, thou shalt have no other Elohim before you. It says, keeping the Sabbath, and thou shalt not murder. But it doesn't tell you what the penalty is. Constitution does the exact same thing. It gives you the fundamental law, but there's no penalty. The penalty is after the government makes the statutes which define the penalties, and it defines the different laws that we have to obey. Normally, under ideal conditions, statutes have to be in harmony with the Constitution. We know that in the United States, many times, that's why we have so many problems, because there are many laws, many statutes that are unconstitutional, and they go to the Supreme Court and they have arguments, and sometimes they're found unconstitutional, sometimes they're not. It can become very complicated. There are if you look in Black's Law Dictionary or Bouvier, you're going to find that statutes are many different types, just possibly hundreds of them. However, for our purposes, basically a statute will tell you when to do certain things. For example, the Passover on, I believe, is Leviticus 23. Let me see if I can get there quickly. Now, I failed to mention that this is strictly my opinion, and you're all welcome to it. Leviticus 23, 23, thank you. It starts off by saying, these are the feasts of Yahweh, even his holy convocations, and you shall proclaim them in their seasons. And then it goes on, in the 14th day of the first month between evenings is Yahweh's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread. Unto Yahweh 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. Then he continues on to explain the things. Well, let me just keep reading then. In the first day ye shall have a holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh 7 days, and the 7th day is a holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. And Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you come into the land which I give unto you, you shall reap the harvest thereof. I'm looking to go down a little further. Okay, if you skip down to 23:14, the last part of the verse, it says, it shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. The statute, for our purposes, basically tells us, defines the timing of when the feast is going to be. Now, the ordinances define how we keep these feasts and how we do things. I found when I was studying this, and I looked up Bovier's and I looked up Westminster Bible, but when I came to Black's Law Dictionary was where it was very clear the understanding of what an ordinance is. It's stated that an ordinance can be changed at any time, which I found fascinating because if you look at the first Passover, if anyone knows where that's at, where it says you shall keep, these are the ordinances of the Passover, you shall keep them within your gates. If anybody knows where that's at, that'll be nice. The ordinance tells them that they have to keep this Passover within their gates. Later on, in another passage, it says you shall not keep them within your gates. You shall keep them where Yahweh places his name. So this clearly shows you that the ordinance changed due to certain circumstances. Well, if you have it, it'll be nice to read it.
Okay, Deuteronomy 12, Paul says, and ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters and your men servants and your maid servants and the Levite that is within your gates, for as much as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. And then in Deuteronomy 31:12, it says, gather the people together, men and women and children, and thy stranger that is within thy gates. This is the place I'm finding within thy gates. Okay?
Right.
That they may hear, and that they may learn and fear Yahweh our Elohim,
Right.
and observe to do all that the words of this law.
Right. Within thy gates is part of the ordinance. Then, a few chapters later, it talks about keeping the Passover where Yahweh has set his name, and you shall not, and specifically says, I shall not keep it within thy gates.
Here's 16:11 says where he places his name.
Right. 16:11.
That's for the Feast of Weeks.
Okay, we can continue. When you've come up with it, we'll read it. Now, because of not only the confusion with the meanings of these of the different laws, and today we do the same thing. We just use the word law indiscriminately, and we don't specify. This fellow that I told him that you're not stopping at the stop sign because it's a law, it's an ordinance. Well, he told me, well, Ray, what difference does it make? If I don't stop, whether it's a law, a statute, an ordinance, a commandment, I still have to pay that ticket. I'm still gonna be liable. And he's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. It doesn't make any difference today if you're driving and if you have to pay that ticket. It doesn't make any difference to you. But when we're studying the scriptures, and we don't have this understanding of the difference between ordinance and statutes, we tend and we come up with different doctrines. And when I say we, I mean most people come up with different doctrines that actually are totally wrong because they do not have this understanding. And one example I'm going to give you, I just before I came to the feast, I got an email, and I'm going to read part of it. It says, "Hi Ray, I comprise the list of all ordinances where the holy days come from. Hope this helps out." I'm going to skip some parts. "Do the context on them in your studies. You will find the holy days were picked from them, but they are clearly done away." Notice how he says clearly done away. And it's so clear that that's why we're here. Then he goes on to say they can be boring at times. And it's true. When you're studying the law and you're certain subjects, they can be a little on the boring side, but they're very important. They're very important. Then he gives me different places where it says in the King James that the holy days are ordinances. Oh, here's another part of it. He says, "Those that keep the holy days are within these mentioned ordinances. They were abolished on the cross." That's what he's saying. I went through many of the different scriptures that he gives me, and I can tell you clearly they are mistranslated. I'm looking for the one. I don't want to go through all of them, but then Mr. Kenyon said that I should spread it out a little bit, so I might go through all of them. The other thing I wanted to bring out about statutes and ordinances is that statutes are laws that are enacted at a certain time, and they go into effect when they're enacted, and they last for a certain time also. This time could be a perpetual. It could be forever, like some of the scriptures say that feasts are perpetual statutes. The ordinances, you cannot have an ordinance without a statute. You always have ordinances. You must have what is known as an enabling statute. For example, the stop sign where you are, the state has to have a statute saying that the cities or the counties or the towns have the right to control traffic. If that statute is not there, that city cannot put up a stop sign, they cannot control traffic. But all the states have this. They have what is called enabling statutes. And then the towns will make these ordinances, and they must comply with that statute, because they spell out certain things that they can and they can't do. And this is why sometimes you have an ordinance that is, they say it's unconstitutional. What you mean, it does not comply with the statute. So you can go to court and contest it, which is what this Patriot group that I was in, we like to specialize then and go and try to contest these things. Now, in making these studies, I find that there's a scripture that I think is one of the most important scriptures there is in the Bible. Again, this is my opinion. And when Yeshua was taken to the mountain to be tempted by Satan the devil, it was one of the first things he said. I believe he quoted Deuteronomy 8, where he said, "Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh." And many times when we make these studies, we leave out certain things that we don't do. I'm sure you all heard the saying that you must think outside the box. Well, I've always looked at these things and said, what do they mean by think outside the box? Apparently, what I've been finding out is that from the moment we're toddlers, we are mostly programmed by our environment. I'm sure you all understand that if you would have been born in somewhere in Israel, you'd probably be observing the religion of either Judaism, or be a Nazarene, be a Karaite. If you were in the Middle East and in Egypt or one of them, you'd probably be worshiping Allah and be a Muslim. So the environment has a lot to do with how we think and what we do. And sometimes we have to break that in order to get back to trying to understand these things, because these, especially the Lord, is very extremely complicated. And there's just so many different doctrines that are based on a misunderstanding of these. Like, for instance, this fellow that just wrote to me and gave me all these scriptures. When I went through them and looked to see when they said ordinance, I realized that the King James actually has most of these words mistranslated. The other problem when we're studying this is that the Hebrew language, sometimes you have one word and it could mean it can have several different meanings. And we usually have to look at the context of what it is so we can come up with the actual meaning. And many times we miss that too because of our programming. The way we program, there's many times we don't see it. One of the scriptures that we have to keep in mind is the one that says, prove all things. Now, no matter what it is that I say or anybody else says up here, it is your responsibility to prove it. The scripture, if anybody comes up with where these scriptures are at, you just say so and we can go to them. The scripture also says that you should study to find yourself approved. It also says that you have to be diligent. And that's a word I encourage you to look up in a good dictionary that has an expanded explanation of what the word diligent means. It means that you do not leave anything out. And again, because our environment, many times we leave things out not meaning to, but we do leave things out. That is being diligent, not to leave anything out. I know many times, like this fella, he comes over and he gives me all these scriptures where the holy days are considered ordinances. Yet, he leaves out all the ones that clearly tell you that they're statutes. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind, is that we have to keep all these different scriptures. I've also been accused of being a legalist. Well, Yahweh is a legalist. This is one of the things, is he gives you his law, and it's all for a reason. The Ten Commandments, for example, is a way that he puts into the physical his spiritual law of love. It's the only way he can explain to us beings what this law of love really is, and how we can learn it, and how we can go and develop ourselves with it. I think I'm running out of material now.
Well, you can go ahead and read Isaiah,
Mm-hmm.
go to chapter 28, 9 and 10.
I have to find it first.
Isaiah.
I have these little clips on the side, because this lady gave me them, and well, she passed away now, and I really didn't want to use them, but because they impair Isaiah, they don't help me find it.
28, 9 and 10.
I didn't want her to feel bad, so I put them all on. Now she passed away, I can take them off. 28, 9 and 10?
9 and 10.
Okay. Isaiah 28, 9. Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast? For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. Actually, this scripture was mocking Yahweh, and It's an interesting study if you look at it, but it's true, that's how he teaches. Precept upon precept and line upon line.
Well, Ray, wasn't it what you were saying is that, you know, you got fundamental law,
Yes,
you got a statute about when, ordinance about how, testimony about, did you have that categorized?
What do you mean testimony?
Things when it was called testimonies in the Bible, what was that called? Where does that fit in with statute, ordinance, testimony, covenant? Keep them all, it says keep the testimonies. So,
I can't answer that one because I'm not aware. What translation are you using? I don't remember seeing testimonies. I remember seeing judgments. Now, judgments, here's an interesting one. Judgments are a good way to compare them, again, is giving an example of today. Today, the courts make decisions. And many times a lawyer will go up to court and say, based on this case by John versus Smith, the Supreme Court has ruled so-and-so, and he brings this information up to the court, and then the judge has to say, does it apply to the case or does it not apply to the case? And if it applies, that stands. That's a judgment. Another word for using that today would be case law. It's law because there was a case on it already and has been judged on. So that's case law. Then that's what Yahweh does. He made judgments. Those are the case laws, and he tells you to follow them. Notice that most of the time he also says, if you keep my commandments, my statutes, and my judgments. He leaves out ordinances. And for a very good reason, because they can change. And they do change. When Yeshua changed symbols of the Passover, you no longer kill a lamb, you now take the wine and the bread. He also instituted a new ordinance, which was the foot washing. Those that lived before the Messiah was crucified were looking towards the return of the Messiah. They were looking to the future, and what they were doing was in faith that their sins would be forgiven by killing this. And in Hebrews it tells you that the killing of the lamb was for the forgiveness of sin. Now once the Messiah died on that stake, no longer are you looking forward to that situation. Now you're looking back. And you're saying, yes, the Messiah that died, he was the Son of Yahweh. And now we take the symbols that he told us, the wine and the bread, because now we're looking back. The other laws, I can go into some of them. You have contract law, which is, today you would consider contract law. In those days it was called covenant, where Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, and there are many covenants in the scriptures. Today you would call those contracts. He made a contract. If you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me and to just go ahead.
Okay, so testimonies in 76 different scriptures, 73 scriptures use 76 times. Testimonies, plural, is in 36 verses, used 36 times.
Uh-huh.
And it's such as, and keep the charge of the Lord thy God to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, and his judgments, and his testimony, as it is written in the law of Moses, and that thou might prosper. So the testimonies, I believe what that word is, once they're written down, once they're recorded. then-
Codified.
Yes.
Now, today you would say
Yes.
codified.
Yes.
And we do have law today they call codified law, like the income tax. It's codified.
You know,
And-
so I just had that thing, and I was trying to figure, you put such a nice picture on how statute relates to the law or the Constitution, and then how ordinance relates to the statute, and I just wondered, okay, testimony then says it's a codified ordinance, so to speak.
Right,
Okay,
right.
all right.
It's codified. See, I needed your help.
If you had your computer, you wouldn't have a problem, all your notes.
You think. The, let me see, what was okay, dietary laws. A lot of people also say that the dietary laws have been done away with. The way I look at that is, if you were eating poison 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, you would die. If you took that same poison today, because the law was nailed to the cross, would you not die? Socrates was given hemlock, which is a poison, and that's how they executed him. And if he were alive today and he drank that hemlock, would he not die? Hemlock is poison today the same way it was poison then. So there's the arguments are like many have said, and like Mr. Kenyon Brother Kenyon was saying, you can talk to them and it goes in one ear and it goes out the other. They want to believe what they're going to believe. We also have a scripture that says you don't give pearls to swine. And we know they're going to trample them over because they don't do it on purpose. They just do it because they don't understand. If you have another question, I'll be very happy to try to answer it. Yes?
The scripture that, 2 Timothy 2:15.
Yes? Can you read it?
So it says, study to show yourself approved unto Yahweh, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
Right, that's one of the ones I told you that whenever we study, we have to keep these different scriptures in mind, and this is what helps us to think outside the box, because we're trying to break our programming. It happens with just about everything we study. The calendar, for example, which is another subject that I was going to speak on, is the same way. It's a very simple, Yahweh's calendar is extremely simple. Yet, most people, and myself, it took me a very long time to understand it. And then I sat back and I said, well, why is it that it took me so long if it's so simple? I mean, I'm not that stupid. And I realized it's my programming. I think of things a totally different way than what those people were thinking 4,000 years ago. And because of the problem we're having with language today, where the words are changing their meaning, you know very well that the word gay doesn't mean gay anymore. It means something totally different. When I was growing up, gay meant being happy and merry. But today it's changed, and I've noticed the same thing happening with the word law. The word law is just used for everything, and we don't have an understanding of what they are. So we use the different definitions that we think they are, and then we get into trouble with doctrines, and there's all kinds of groups out there doing different things. One of the things I always tell people is, the things that hurt you the most is not what you don't know, but what you think you know and is not true. These are the things that really get you into trouble all the time.
Well, Going into 2 Timothy 3, chapter 3, you go down to the one verse that I bring up is, you know, they're always writing books and doing shows and doing whatever. The scripture says, ever learning but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. And
That's me.
today,
And that's me. Oh, always learning and never coming to, well, hopefully, I'm coming to some of the truth, and I keep advancing, but it's not that you're not supposed to do that, it's that you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to always learning. Unfortunately, if you don't do it the right way, you're never going to come to the knowledge of the truth, because you're leaving out certain scriptures like proving all things, being diligent, not leaving anything out. And hopefully, if we study, if we don't leave these things out, we can get there.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
I don't know where it's law, ordinance, or what, but it sounds to me like it's a terrible law and ordinance or whatever. I don't know how anybody could ever really obey this. It's in Deuteronomy 24, verse 5. When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home for 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife. Now, how in the world could we take that kind of law? Isn't that something terrible?
My wife told me, no sarcasm. I don't know how we can keep that law, but the part about keeping her cheered up for 1 year is the part I don't think we can accomplish.
Come on, I've been retired 6 years now, look how cheery he works.
You're not there all the time when she talks to me.
Really talked.
Very good.
Okay, I think I exhausted my material. I don't have anything else at the top of my head that I can cover. So I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today.